You may be asking yourself, who in the world is Charles Spurgeon? Well, in a biography by Philip Ort, he says that Spurgeon was born on June 19, 1834, and he died on January 31st, 1892, known as the Prince of Preachers. The Victorian Calvinistic Baptist minister testified as a powerful gospel witness in his time, but his influence endures today. In 1861, the Metropolitan Tabernacle opened and his ministry exploded, resulting in the founding of 66 parachurches. Now, the Metropolitan Tabernacle is found in London, England. But there's a couple issues with regards to how Spurgeon defines the gospel. I'm going to read from his book, A Defense of Calvinism, located at 124 in the Kindle edition. It says, I have my own private opinion that there is no such thing as preaching Christ and Him crucified unless we preach what is nowadays is called Calvinism. It is a nickname to call it Calvinism, and notice this, Calvinism is the gospel. Let me repeat that. Calvinism is the gospel according to Charles Spurgeon. I'm going to finish the quote here. It says, I do not believe we can preach the gospel if we do not preach justification by faith without works nowhere, unless we preach the sovereignty of God in His dispensation of grace, nor unless we exalt the electing and unchanging, eternal, immutable, conquering love of Jehovah, nor do I think we can preach the gospel unless we base it upon special and particular redemption of His elect and chosen people with whom Christ wrought out upon the cross, nor can I comprehend a gospel which lets saints fall away after they are called and suffers the children of God to be burned in the fires of damnation after they have once believed in Jesus. Such a gospel I abhor. So here it seems to be that Spurgeon is plugging in what is commonly known today as the tulip acrostic. But the problem with that is that he's trying to plug in from what I can tell, the irresistible grace and the limited atonement. He calls it particular atonement, but it's limited atonement. And he also plugs in, of course, the perseverance of the saints. But I want to look at it from a historical perspective, that there's a problem with calling Calvinism the gospel. And this can be found in William Edwards' Theology for Ministry, How Doctrine Affects Life and Pastoral Practice, on page 305. It says, Calvinists who responded with their own 5 points in the canons of the Synod of Dort. So he's talking about this meeting that the Dutch had to respond to these individuals known as the Remonstrants, where they are more commonly known today as the Arminians, where they have the 5 points of Arminianism, and the Calvinists during this time, they responded with their 5 points, which came to be known as the tulip acrostic, or known as the Doctrines of Grace. But see, this council, or this synod, if you will, happened in 1618. So if this acrostic only came out in 1618, then we have a serious problem historically calling Calvinism the gospel. But even from a biblical perspective, the Bible never defines the gospel Calvinistically. The Bible defines the gospel in Romans chapter 1, verse 16. We see a definition of the gospel in Romans 1:16. It says, For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and then to the Greek. And the content of the gospel is shown in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 1 through 4. It says, Now I want to make clear for you, brothers and sisters, the gospel I preached to you, which you received, on which you have taken your stand, and you are being saved if you hold to the message that I have preached to you, unless you have believed in vain. Verse 3 says, For I passed on to you what is most important, what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that He was buried, and that He was rose again on the third day according to the Scriptures. So we have the death, burial, and resurrection. That does not at all seem like the Calvinistic soteriological position. So for Charles Spurgeon to define the gospel as Calvinism is in error.